Welcome to Nuanced Conversations, the podcast where depth meets dialogue, hosted by Dr. George E. Hurt. This show explores the gray areas of life, where faith, wisdom, and real-world complexities intersect. No easy answers, just honest conversations that challenge, inspire, and inform. Get ready to lean in, listen closely, and explore the nuance. This is Nuanced Conversations.
What did y'all know about Detroit?
Absolutely. Well, I had an uncle here, I'm in California now. My mother's oldest brother lived there. In fact, it was his home in which I stayed until they got the church's parsonage. I don't live in a parsonage now, but until the church's house was ready. I stayed in his home and my aunt's home, along with their two daughters and son. And his bed was my bed. So, she handled it like a champ. And Cecil was, and matter of fact, she was pregnant with our oldest daughter, Brandy, at the time. And I didn't know much about Detroit any more than having gone there to do that revival. Did two of them. They called me after the second one, and I had to come to know what Detroit was all about. Otherwise, it was just going to a place to preach, staying, doing the revival. Revival is over, catch a plane, go home.
What was the context of Detroit at this point?
Detroit was transitioning out of the civil rights, the impact of the civil rights era, the transformation of blacks coming into politics more heavily than the 1960s and 1970s. I think at that time, Detroit had a black mayor when I arrived in the city of Detroit. Yes, Coleman Alexander Young. So the political landscape was changing. Blacks were coming into their own politically.
It's 85.
It's 1985. Socially, and geographically as well. So it was a emerging Detroit. Well, I would say re-emerging and a reimagining of Detroit when I went there as pastor.
Did you know any other pastors there at the time?
I did not.
Besides Simmons, who you did the revival for?
I did not. I did not know any pastors in Detroit.
What was some of your first early relationships there?
The pastors who received me were Pastor Gabriel Lewis, who pastored the Second New Baptist Church, Ferndale, Everett Jennings, who, by the way, his mother and my mother were Robinsons, who came from the same town in Alabama, Demopolis, Alabama. Now, Demopolis is about as big as this microphone that I'm speaking on. So the likelihood of two Robinsons coming from that place, which was so small, were cousins. So, and this is how I bonded with the Jennings family. Edward L. Branch, who is now retired, pastored the Third New Hope Baptist Church. And Dr. Velman Stotts, who became a mentor, Dr. David Kelly. Yes, Unity Baptist Church. Dr. David Kelly. These are men who are now resting in the pleasantries of paradise. Took me in as his own son and under his tutelage. And as time progressed, I began to meet other pastors, preach for other pastors, but those were the first who embraced me as a newcomer into the city of Detroit and into the black church community. And I'll never forget them for how they took me as a brother and as a son. Yes.
What was Galilee like as a church, and what was that transition like, especially in comparison to having so many intimate relationships in the Southern hospitality, if you will?
Galilee at the time was a family church, very close-knitted, not a large congregation at all. It might have been 300 members there on the church's roll, and very family controlled. And over time, with new disciples influxing and ingressing into our congregation, that family grip, and this is not to demean or belittle, those families, because matter of fact, our 83rd church anniversary was just this past Sunday, and I just called the roll, the names of those individuals whose families were foundational in our church, so that to remind our congregants now who is at the foundation of our church. So, but when those families begin to wane or die out, so to speak, the elders, the older generation dying out, newcomers begin to come into our church family, the church dynamics of leadership and worker ship begin to change, and more accepting of individuals who are not of blood or friendship begin to assume roles of leadership in our church. That was different. Now, culturally, whereas the South was more spirited in their worship expression and their cordial behavior. You can go to anybody's house at any time. Gotcha. Culture shock when you get to Michigan. Different type of culture. Now, they were spiritual, true enough, spirited, yes, but not as Southern aura and ambiance of worship. I take it that they were more appreciative of an intellectual approach to church work, to church worship, to preaching, church liturgy. Whereas the South, it was, and this does not infer that they were less appreciative of, or not appreciative rather, of an intellectual approach to things, but it was this more emotive and emotively expressive in their worship than a crowd that would listen for substance in a sermonic expression. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. How are you maturing as a preacher and a pastor at this point?
Still growing.
Yeah.
Man, I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I learn from younger pastors like yourself. And what are you guys doing? How are you affecting your congregation? Now, I am growing, I would say, intellectually. I am growing more socially with the younger generation, Now, I grew up old school preacher, conservative suit, white shirt, black tie.
Yes, sir.
So, and the young people have gotten me out of it. It was like pulling hen's teeth out of a necktie in the pulpit. I mean, that's sacrilegious, man. What am I doing? I am demeaning my training. But nevertheless, and matter of fact, it'll be youth-led worship this Sunday. So I will be tie-less and probably in casual shoes because I'm growing. Not that I'm trying to be different.
Yeah.
I'm growing and learning that sometimes you can allow tradition to be an impediment and concretize to, a certain custom, that it could become an impediment to your generational connect.
Yeah.
And if this is what it takes to connect, then I'm no less preacher, I'm no less pastor, I'm no less a father figure. It's just that this is a type of aura that they can identify with, because this Generation Z and somewhat the millennials as well, they are different.
Very different
in their worship posture. And they could care less about you and your necktie and your collar and, and your traditional liturgies. They want it in their genre.
Well, let's go there. Yeah. We had a little bit of discussion on that on the way in. Recently, you ran for National Baptist president. What was that experience like? What did you learn from that experience? Are you still probably processing?
You want me to be honest?
Yes, please.
You didn't ask me an honest question because there were those in whom I had great confidence, but I've lost that because of and I'm just being honest.
Yes, sir.
Because of the deceptive behavior and manipulative actions to thwart a legitimate constitutional process to make an election fair. And because of those actions and dispositions and voting by those who assume the role of leadership and governance of our convention, I have lost a lot of confidence, and I'm trying to keep from saying all, in them, because these were and are individuals who preach fairness, who preach truth, who preach unity, who preach righteousness, but did just the opposite to favor one individual over against several others. And in my opinion, God did not smile upon it, is not smiling upon it, and as far as my theological ramifications go, cannot smile upon it. As for me, my conscience is clear. We did everything by the book. We followed every rule, even during the time of filing grievance. We filed our grievance, which was legitimate. We proved all of our records, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And for the directors of the board to vote not to take a constitutional matter to the body politic of a convention so that a convention could decide its own destiny, then this body becomes a dictatorship for those who pay the bills, but who cannot have a voice or a vote. This is my dissatisfaction and disaffection with those who, in the name of brotherhood, righteousness, convention, who perhaps don't know where our convention once was. Some, I believe, do remember our days of carrying 40,000 plus into an arena, into a city on any given convention venue. The city itself couldn't hold us all. We were staying 30 and 40 miles out, some 60 miles, just because of what the convention had at that time, people and properties. In fact, the convention once had a seat at the United Nations. The National Baptist Convention had a seat at the United Nations with the power to help shape world policy. And to have been relegated to where we are now is an insult to those who paved the way for the convention to become what it had become and what it is today, and to see the recipients of all of that hard labor, all of that hard work, all of that sacrifice reduce the convention to what it is today, and to manipulate your own brother, whose hand you shook, whose shoulders you hugged, etc., and manipulate him out of a process and them out of the process. So beyond that, I am fine. I'm still who I am. Absolutely. I never stopped preaching.
Absolutely.
I never waned from pastoring. It's just, and it's not hard for me to shake their hands and look at them eye to eye, because I know my conscience is clear and I know we did the right thing. Yeah. As far as the convention itself, I can only hope and pray that it finds its purpose and rediscover its purpose.
Would you be open to involvement in that process, or you sort of after this experience, or you need more time to think through that?
I I'm no longer processing because I went through the process. I'll say I am, if I could, for the lack of a better word, I'm healing.
Gotcha.
From it. Because to have seen what I've seen, to have experienced what I've experienced, is a disappointment. So if healing is not the word, I'm getting over the disappointment.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that was transparent and honest.
Yeah.
That's what we try to do here in this space.
Certainly.
Let's kind of dig deeper into convention and maybe some of the historical. You mentioned J.X. Jackson earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Some of maybe the historical blind spots, in my opinion, maybe that we didn't see even in the years of having 40,000 people, having things in place. As we talked about earlier, look at institutions like World Vision, Samaritan Purse, i.e. on and on and on. And in no way I can list other, African American led organizations to make the same. Even maybe if you look at some of the fluidity of the conferences, just, E.K. Bailey, IC3, and so on and so on, WHW, Frank Ray's conference. When you look back through your experience and look back at the history of it, what blind spots do you think exist even in what the quote unquote heyday that may be led to no longer being a voice in local politics, national politics, world politics, not having systems in place to make sure that at least there's a clean process. I'm sure if somebody else was on the opposite side in space, they'll make an argument they did do all these things, and your angle is just looking at it through your angle. But if there was maybe a cleaner policy in place, systems in place, I'm just asking, do you think could have maybe avoided some of the cons now in the experience that you had in running for president?
I'll take the former first. Somehow, some way, somewhere, after Joseph Harrison Jackson, the National Baptist Convention lost its disposition towards Black nationalism. We've got God. We've got Jesus. You talk to a Black man, he's got Jesus, right? But we lost our sense of Black nationalism.
What is Black nationalism?
Embracing the Black community, advocating for the Black community, Black business, Black church, HBCUs, and the list goes on and on and on. We somehow, some way, devalued the importance of what we owned by trying to amalgamate and assimilate with another culture who has never been receptive of us. And we're beginning to see that resurface with Trumpism. So in the days of following Dr. J.H. Jackson, the convention went into a building, individualistic kind of church attitude, meaning that under Dr. Jameson, and God bless and God rest his soul, he had a concept of the convention having a headquarters. So he sold some property, acquired the resources, built a headquarters. But the headquarters was never occupied by the leadership of the convention entities. And in the event of paying for a building, along with older pastors dying out, younger pastors taking on churches who did not grow up in the convention era, etc., somehow we lost the protest to production kind of mentality. We lost the proactive agenda as that of the civil rights era with John Lewis, with Martin Luther King Jr., with and others. So I think that because of the eventuation towards a more independent black church, we lost the collective dependence of black nationalism. Mm. And the convention got lost in that process. Because now most of what black pastors and churches do is reactionary, more so than proactive. And this is how other national bodies have maintained their strength, because they had their own consciousness, their own mission. Their mission was clear, their objectives were certain, but somehow, some way, we lost it.
Two things. One is my analysis, and I would love to be corrected, of J.X. Jackson's reign. Mm-hmm. Well, it was highly controversial. Mm-hmm. He was someone that extended his term somehow, some way, every time. Yeah. He also was, in our equivalent, pro-Nixon would be equivalent to being pro-Trump today almost. Mm-hmm. Not as quiet. Nixon was not as polarizing, but it was divisiveness towards that. And there was always attempt. Right. In fact, there's a YouTube clip where people are booing him. Right.
Because of his support for the conservative agenda. Yeah. Yeah, he was a staunch Republican. His philosophy was, you have to have something to get to the table for negotiations. Mm-hmm. And if you bring something to the table for negotiations, you have the power to negotiate, to gain leverage from your opponent. Mm-hmm. I was about to say oppressors, but to him, they weren't oppressors. Gotcha. If he knew it, he didn't make it known, because he knew that they were going to win. And he said it in one of his sermons. It might not have been the one to which you're referring, which the title was The Challenge of the Cross. His contention was, vote for the candidate who is going to win. And aside from that was Martin Luther King Jr.'s disposition, we've got to fight for our rights.
And the King clash, right?
The clash was really over tenure in the National Baptist Convention, mm-hmm. more so than political disposition. And because Dr. Jackson's, because of his eloquent preaching and pulpit aura, he was the one who incorporated the voting of the president for a successive term by having the vote taken after he preached. So while the people were under that J.S. Jackson preaching spell, they voted back in time after time after time. That's how he did, I think, for 27 years. Yeah. That's unheard of. It's unheard of. So he and Martin Luther King Jr. never came to terms on how to handle black nationalism. King's thing was, give us our rights. We want to live where we want to live, work where we want to work, be in the political process as we deserve, because of what happened in Reconstruction. Mm-hmm. 1873. Nevertheless, J.S. Jackson's contention was, move from protest to production, own something, negotiate, demand, and have leverage. And they were at an impasse and never came to terms one with the other. Wow. So to the latter part of your question, that the system that the convention had in place to prevent what happened in September 2024 was systematic enough for the convention not to embarrass itself and insult individuals who are vying for the office of the presidency. It was systematic enough so that people who registered, churches who registered, would not be disenfranchised. This law, I think it was Augustine, who said any law that is unjust is no law at all. Mm-hmm. Our law, which is the Constitution for the convention, that is not unjust. It was decent enough, systematic enough, clarion enough to be followed. But those individuals who are governing the board and the leadership for the convention failed to follow that, which is how we've ended up where we are, and now we've gotten even weaker.
What was your maybe 3 passions that you had for the convention if you were able to get the opportunity to serve as president?
Foreign mission, if I can say foreign mission, and I don't like to use the word foreign, they're our brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. Worldwide mission. Worldwide missions to affect those in undeveloped countries to the extent that they could become self-sustaining. Now, evangelism, of course, is at the top of all of this. Now, you can call it church campaign, membership drive. It all boils down to evangelism because the convention is a conglomerate of churches, not a church itself. Second piece would have been that of the African-American community, helping our people reinvest in themselves. The third piece will have been the political component so as to affect the political landscape with capable and competent individuals who are very strong with Black consciousness. I am unapologetic when it comes to my community because any other demographic or culture in America is blatant. They are sincere about who they are and what they want. You take anyone from the Jewish community, their concern is the state of Israel. Take any Palestinian or Arab, for that matter, their main concern is the Palestinian state. And unashamedly, the demographic in Michigan, the Palestinian demographic, voting demographic, refused to vote in this past election, did not, because of what's going on in Gaza as we speak. Why? Because their concern is the Palestinian state. You've never heard anyone from the LGBTQ community. And this is not to say that your show nor my personal disposition is against LGBTQ. That's not the issue here. The point is they have an agenda. They push their agenda.
Absolutely.
Right? We see now what the white supremacist agenda has been since Donald Trump came down an escalator and announced his candidacy for president of the United States of America. This is why you had an insurrection. People climbing, scaling walls of the national capital when the steps were just a few feet away from them to express their nationalism. The Black community does not have a specific agenda since the civil rights era. This is where I will have been taking the convention. Now, this includes job fairs, LLC forums, rural church programs, pastoral counseling, and the list goes on. This is where I will have taken the convention on a major scale to answer your question about my 3 passions. Yeah. And I think this will have at least gotten us to a more relevant and respectable level in American society.
Well, man, so much more to talk about. Yeah. We're out of time. Yeah. Praise God for it, but I want to get out of here on something fun because we've been heavy the whole time. What is hooping? Hooping is in the words of Henry Mitchell, is indescribable. It's that indescribable something that is a part of the African American preaching experience. It is that lyrical summation of a sermon that he says, and along with Frank Thomas, who is now the voice on Black preaching,
this comes from our African heritage, who in the event of their communicating, they sang their communication. They intoned their communication. They verbalized it with, cadence. And this kind of closing of a sermon, I believe, embraces a whole lot of nuance. But what is it? It's hard to describe. My thing is, it's the summation of that sermon with some musical emphasis. Mm-hmm. The black preachers got to holler for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And in the event of that hooping or that hollering, it just seems like it's the icing on the cake.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And for others who may, not feel as though lyrical preaching is
educated,
right? Yeah. And it's old, it's antiquated. I beg to differ.
Yeah.
Because when that black preacher gets into that cadence and that music, that rhythmic conveyance of that sermon, and then close it with the hoop, it says, "Now I'm celebrating."
Yeah.
I've given you the message, but just let me give you some extra to hold on to this message.
I feel good now.
Yeah. I'm this part's for me, not just for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Top 5 hoopers of all time, in your opinion?
That's a tough one. Now, of course, we know C.L. Franklin gets the number one space. We know that. I guess I was a big fan of Caesar Clark.
Yeah.
He would be one. And of course, those we heard mostly 1990s of the younger generation, I guess, would be a Jasper Williams, who was recording at the time in the 1980s. Now 4 and 5, this is going to be kind of hard to say top 5 hoopers. And I'm using these names because pre-social media.
Yeah.
To hear a preacher was to go where they were preaching.
Originality.
Yes. Yeah. And so we heard the so-called intellectuals, the Samuel DeWitt Proctors, the Gardner Taylors, the Y.T. Walkers. So, and the Dr. Sandy Rays, we heard them, but they didn't holler and hoop like the other guys, so to speak. So since they were the voices we heard, pre-social media, conventions, congresses, and revivals when they would come to our cities, those are the top 3 names that really come to mind.
No,
I'm struggling with 4 and 5. I'm trying, and I could call several names.
Just throw some names, just some names that jump out to you. Don't worry about top 5. Yeah,
today,
just some great hoopers. Period.
Original raw talent. Bernard Mitchell, even though he's a cousin of mine, is just a rare, gifted preacher who works hard at putting his sermon together, delivers his sermon, and then hoops it out towards the end. And for number 5, that's
don't even worry about the 5. Just people that jump to your mind when you think about, that's somebody that's good at the craft.
I have to go East Coast, West Coast.
So many.
So there's so many areas.
So many ranges, so many different styles, so many different ways.
Yeah.
And of course, you can't put yourself on there,
of course not.
Everybody else would put you on there. So you'll be the imaginary 5 for the rest of us. For the rest of us, not you.
Yeah.
And
yes. Yeah. So I would say guys, pastors who I preach with, maybe in revivals, man, it's tough.
Yeah, so many. Yeah,
it's tough. I would mention a Tim Glenn,
Tolan Morgan,
and a Tolan Morgan. I would say this younger generation, and now Tolan Morgan. I think he would be a legitimate rounding out the five.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's different.
I didn't think of Tolan, but
different styles and different occasions.
Tremendous preacher.
Yeah, because some people you got the smoother styles and things of that nature. People who intellect in their preaching sometimes make you miss how good their preaching, their closing is, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah. Lastly, 5, whatever, not even a number, just most impactful Black preachers today in American history.
In American history.
In American history.
Aside from those names that we mentioned, the originators of the Black church, like
Richard Allen.
You're not referencing them, of course.
Yeah, I would reference Allen in.
Well, then you've got to put the founding fathers there.
And who would be considered the founding fathers?
You have
Allen,
Richard Allen. Joseph Harrison Jackson. And today, I mean, you got Otis Moss, a tremendous intellectual, Harry Wright, who's still living.
Otis Moss Jr.
Otis Moss Jr.
Yeah, the third.
Not the third.
Yeah.
Otis Moss
but
Jr.
the third is great, but you're
Otis
talking about
Moss
overall impact.
Jr.
Yeah.
He may be unsung.
Yeah, very unsung.
But my God, what an intellectual, what a tremendous preacher. Martin Luther King Jr. Has to be a part of that conversation.
Frederick Douglass.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Frederick, well, there's your 5.
Yeah.
There's your 5. And, I mean, to who is comparable to Samuel DeWitt Proctor?
There's a lot. I think when I think of impact, I'm thinking of the Kings, the Douglasses that just preaching history. America is shaping the church that spills over. You probably have to put Charles Mason, the
from Kojic community.
So
C.H. Mason.
C.H. Mason, you probably have to put in there as well. Yes. Well, listen, we have to bring you back because I know half of the stuff I didn't get to that I wanted to talk to for. But thank you for your time, your transparency, your honesty here on Nuanced Conversations. Thank you for tuning in. Look out for the next episode, upcoming season, and ways that you can support this space. My name's George Hurt again, creator and curator, and we're out. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on Nuanced Conversations. We invite you to return next week as we continue this dialogue. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode and share this conversation with others who may find it valuable. Until next time,